Going to kick off my series on Fae and Fairies. So to begin, I would like to start with Samhain, spelt Samhain, but pronounced Samhain as it is a Gaelic word, and this is a tradition that goes back some 2,000 years. As the text says behind me, and I will read for you, it's a pagan religious festival originating from an ancient Celtic spiritual tradition. It is usually celebrated from October 31st to November 1st to welcome in the harvest and usher in the dark half of the year. Celebrants believe that the barriers between the physical world and the spirit world break down during Samhain, allowing more interactions between the humans and the denizens of the other world. There are many rituals that take place during Samhain. Many that have evolved throughout the time from the ancient Celts, which moved from Ireland to Scotland to Wales and was also influenced by the medieval times. Tonight, as the barrier between the two realms grow thin, spirits walk amongst us once again. They be family, friends and foes, pets and wildlife, fishes and crows. This feast I shall leave on my doorstep at night. In my window one candle shall burn bright, to help my loved ones find their way as they travel this eve and this night until dawn. Bless my offering, both lady and lord, by breads and fruits, greens and gourd. Dark mother, your cauldron is a well of death and rebirth. Dark father, your sword both protects and annihilates. Hear me now, as the past year slowly dies, only to be reborn again. May the good come to pass and the bad be cast aside. With the divine guidance and protection, I step into the new year. In life is death, and in death is life. Tonight we are joined again. As with a lot of things, Hollywood has bastardized many traditions that mean a lot to a lot of us and to those of us that still practice. I am half Irish, my father is Irish, and I'm of Irish heritage, and learning about Celtic traditions was always really important to me. Now this is where the whole thing about dressing up from Halloween comes from, Samhain and its monsters. Because the Celts believed that the barrier between the worlds was breachable during Samhain, they prepared offerings that were left outside villages and fields for the fairies and Sids. It was expected that the ancestors might cross over during this time as well, and Celts would dress up as animals and monsters so that fairies were not tempted to kidnap them. So this is why people would dress up. They would dress up to disguise themselves so that the fairies didn't think that they were humans ready to be kidnapped, or that any, evil entities that did cross over wouldn't bother them. The offerings equally were to appease the fairies, as I will get onto later on throughout my exploration of the Fae. It was deemed that they can be tricky folk, and if they are displeased, then they can, let's just say, their tricks aren't always amusing. Some specific monsters were associated with mythology surrounding Samhain, including a shape-shifting creature called a puka that receives harvest offerings from the field. The Lady Gwyn is a headless woman dressed in white who chases night wanderers and was accompanied by a black pig. The Dullen sometimes appeared as impish creatures, sometimes headless men on horses who carried their heads, riding flame-eyed horses. Their appearances was a death omen to anyone who encountered them. A group of hunters known as the Slough or Fairy Host might also haunt Samhain and kidnap people. Similar are the Slough, who would come from the west to enter the house and snatch souls. So these are all things that were believed once upon a time, and when they were believed, people obviously had to take precautions to protect their home, their hearth, their loved ones and themselves. Now I know many of you are familiar with the Halloween jack-o'-lantern, or pumpkin as we call it more in the UK. We don't really use the term jack-o'-lantern. However, here behind me we have a gourd. Gourd is a type of root vegetable, so you can look at your turnips, your parsnips and so on. And this is what was originally used to be carved out, make scary faces, and this was believed that it would keep evil witches and evil fairies at bay from the home so that they wouldn't be able to cross the threshold and take any unsuspecting victim. This was done Usually it would be done during the day on the 31st, as it was believed that Samhain would take place over the 31st and the 1st. But that's why on Samhain, Halloween, at midnight is the particular time which was known as the witching hour. Nowadays people call midnight the witching hour all the time, however that's not accurate and it isn't where it originated from. However, as time went on, it became our more familiar counterpart, pumpkin. And of course the pumpkin then stuck. It became something that was popular and everybody seemed to like it. I imagine part of the reason is that a pumpkin is a lot easier to carve than a parsnip or a turnip, especially with, you know, getting everything out and making sure that you can make those scary faces on there. As time has evolved, people have just made it into a tradition, and some of the faces are, you know, really great artwork, or they're just silly faces. I know there's the quite popular one that makes it look like the pumpkin is vomiting and all the pumpkin seeds are coming out of the mouth, which I think is quite funny. But this is where the tradition actually stemmed from. It had nothing to do with the candy company, and that isn't the reason why Halloween exists today. Halloween exists from a very serious, well-respected pagan tradition. And again, because of the fear that the Celts had of the Fae, and we will get on to why they had this fear, here is why Samhain was created. And the reason I'm starting with this as opposed to starting with the Fae and their history in general is because we are approaching Spooktember, and we are getting very close to the best time of the year, which is autumn, or fall for those across the world. And here we have one of my favourite traditions. This is to honour the ancestors more so than anything else, because when it came to Samhain, it wasn't just about keeping certain scary creatures or beings at bay, it was also about honouring your ancestors. So that's what November the 1st was for. It was about specifically ensuring that you would honour those that had passed on before you. And a dumb supper was one of the most traditional ways to do that. And it has also been, integrated into not just those who have pagan beliefs, but witches in general. A lot of witches that observe Samhain, whether you be pagan or not, do carry out dumb suppers during Samhain to just remember and honour those that have passed on. So the tradition of the dumb supper began during this time, as in the medieval time, in which food was consumed by celebrants, but only after inviting ancestors to join in, giving the families a chance to interact with the spirits until they left following dinner. Children would play games to entertain the dead, while adults would update the dead on the past year's news. The night doors and windows might be left open for the dead to come in and eat cakes that had been left for them. Now, usually what happens during a dumb supper is this version, obviously there is jovialty as in any other dinner party or party. However, a lot of people believe that the dumb supper itself doesn't just represent dumb as in quiet. It doesn't mean dumb as in a derogatory term. It just means that obviously the dead aren't able to speak. And what that means is that a lot of people, to respect the dead even more, is that they don't speak either. So the table is lit by candlelight, people surround the table, the food that is made and prepared is the favourite dishes of your loved ones and ancestors, and you eat in silence. Once the meal is over, you then quietly thank your ancestors for coming, you blow the candles out, and then the food that is obviously not eaten by the dead is then either given to wildlife or buried in the earth, or given to pets to be consumed, because we're not wasting food. And last but not least for today's video, where Christianity comes into play. So Christianity gained a foothold in pagan communities. They say foothold, it was a lot more sinister and darker than that, but I'm not going to go into it right now. However, if you do know your history by any means, you know that it wasn't exactly an invitation that we posed to them. Church leaders attempted to reframe Samhain and make it a Christian celebration. The first attempt was by Pope Boniface in the 5th century. He moved the celebration to May 13th, specified it as a day of celebrating saints and martyrs. The fire festivals of October and November, however, did not end with this decree. In the 9th century, Pope Gregory moved the celebration back to the fire festivals and declared it All Saints' Day on November 1st and All Souls' Day on November 2nd. Still celebrating the ancestors, but of course they had to rebrand it.